Coming up, the exact opposite of rat poison for Alabama and a powerful message coming from Florida. We'll tell you all about it next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. You look to my right, you do not see the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. You do see our buddy Hans Heiser. Good to have him back on the program here with us as Mike enjoys a little day off today. And Hans, it's always good to see you.
It's always good to see you. So Mike was at Daytona yesterday.
Daytona. I'm sure there'll be some stories coming out of that.
I can only imagine. So he's dealing with a little bit under the weather today. There's stuff going around.
Come on now, this was a planned day off.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's going to be good stuff from Mike Johnson. He'll be back with us tomorrow. I'm sure he'll have some stories to tell from what is one of the great sporting events of the South, certainly for this.
You ever been?
Time. I've been to a NASCAR race. I have not been to the Daytona 500.
Okay, close enough. Aren't they all the same?
Yeah,
I mean,
right? It's a pretty wild.
Sorry, I forgive my audience. I'm so sorry.
Let's begin the show the way we always do with the big news around the SEC. We call it our first and 10, and item number 1 on our list here on SEC Country Live involves exactly the kind of comments from the media that I think Nick Saban enjoys. You know, going back to the season, what Saban said about when the media gives his team too many compliments. He has a very specific phrase that he likes to use to describe that when he's hearing too many kind words from reporters. In fact, if you've forgotten, let me remind you what Saban has said about that kind of stuff in the past.
I'm trying to get our players to listen to me instead of listening to you guys. You know, all that stuff you write about how good we are and all that stuff they hear on ESPN, it's like poison. You know what I mean? It's like taking poison, like rat poison. All right, so I'm asking them, are you going to listen to me or are you going to listen to these guys about how good you are?
So Saban says when you hear too many kind things, that's like rat poison. And Hans, if that's the way Saban feels, then he's probably liking what he's hearing from ESPN right now, because if you look at their FPI, which I've said before, I'm not great at math. I don't know how these numbers are tabulated. I still think they're interesting. When you look at their recent FPI data, sort of projecting the 2018 season, we find out that Clemson is actually ranked ahead of the defending national champions, Alabama. Here's how Brad Edwards, one of the ESPN statisticians, sort of described this on a recent episode of SportsCenter. He says, there's one difference in Clemson's favor that put them at number 1. Clemson's got 5 more returning starters than Alabama. It's because Clemson had several underclassmen who were good enough to maybe be early round picks in the draft decide to stay. Alabama's guys in that same boat decided to go out for the draft. Once again, that's Brad Edwards from ESPN on a recent episode of SportsCenter. So my question for you is this, both twofold. Do you agree that returning talent is enough to make Clemson ahead of Alabama right now? And how much do you think that Nick Saban likes hearing somebody talk up somebody other than his team during the offseason?
Well, I'll start with your second part of the question. He loves that. Anything he can do to motivate these young men to get them ready for the grueling season ahead, he's going to use it. It's one of the things he does better than any coach in any sport in the history of athletics here in our country. But as far as, you know, counting starters and they got more guys coming back, last time I checked, Kelly Bryant had only lost 1 game as a starter. Didn't look too good in the college football playoffs. Tua, by the way, and I want to ask you about this. I mean, the national championship game, the cojones of Coach Saban to put that guy out there at halftime, a quarterback who Jalen Hurts has just been anything short of remarkable for him as far as winning football games. It's incredible that he made that decision. But so long as Tua's coming back, they got 3 outstanding playmakers at the wide receiver position. Harris is coming back. You know, on defense, they just reload. And then you throw in the fact that a not-so-difficult, non-conference schedule when you throw in Louisville and teams like that. I think it's 1A and 1B. I really think you're splitting hairs comparing those two teams.
Well, the frustrating thing for me is, as someone who would like to see another team besides Alabama be able to climb that mountain for 2018, is this is giving Saban exactly what he wants. You mentioned this a moment ago. You know, this kind of thing where you can say they're already doubting you because, you know, as Mike Johnson says all the time, this is the time of the year, you know, when the Alabama strength and conditioning coach is sort of, you know, Scotty Cochran, that strength and conditioning coach. He's putting those guys in the ringer every single day, and this is just one more log to throw in that fire of motivation of they're saying Clemson's going to be better than you. They've forgotten that y'all the national champions, and this is just one more thing that Alabama can use to sort of stir that pot over and over again and reignite those passions for players to make sure they work hard all winter long, heading to spring practice, which is going to begin in a couple of weeks. So from that element, it is frustrating. I respect the idea that returning talent does matter.
Right.
I respect the idea that Clemson got pretty lucky when it was able to keep some of those guys, especially some of those defensive guys who chose to come back. I respect all of that, but I mean, how many times is the media essentially going to give Alabama exactly what it wants? And that to me is what this feels like.
Right.
Another opportunity of the media giving Alabama exactly what it wants, exactly what it needs for Saban to construct the narrative that he wants to construct.
And to the other side of that, Dabo Swinney, he kind of feeds off this stuff too. He can't be feeling good the fact that his team is already the heir apparent, that they're kind of getting this sense of entitlement that, hey, you guys are the #1 team in the nation, coming off that loss in the college football playoff against Alabama. I mean, that was so one-sided. They looked like they were completely, I don't want to say leaps and bounds behind Alabama, but to have them anointed as the #1 team by some people in the media, that's not what Dabo wants to be dealing with right now.
Jerry Lewis in the comment section, you mentioned Saban's decision to put Tua Tagovailoa in the national championship game. Jerry says, I'm not giving Saban that much credit with the Tua decision. Red Tua was clearly better in practice the whole time. He was losing and he knew Tua could help him win. Too simple to be a genius. He says, I'm not saying Saban in general isn't a genius, just not for that Tua thing. And, you know, there is a degree to which I almost agree with Jerry on this, that the true genius of Saban might have been playing Tua before he did. You know, it's almost the desperation sense of, hey, second half of the national championship game, we're either, you know, play your best guy or lose. At that point in time, maybe the Saban hand got forced. I mean, clearly that's an unorthodox decision. There are not a lot of coaches in college football that could have made a decision like that because they don't have enough job security. But it's almost a desperation of the situation for Saban to do what had been the smart decision all season long.
Right, and you know, and June Jones said, I heard an interview with him earlier on in the season when he said the best player in college football is on Alabama's bench. I said, okay, that's a little hyperbole. That seems a little bit too far-fetched. But in the small sample size, going into next season, when you're talking about the upper echelon, the top 5 programs in college football, I think he is what separates him from the competition. And I'll take it back to the Clemson conversation. Kelly Bryant is not a difference maker at that position. Is Trevor Lawrence? He's 18 years old. Eventually, you know, if you're a Clemson fan, you hope he's the guy. But what I saw out of Tua in that small sample size, he is that guy. I don't think there's any question about it.
Becky Sawyer in the comment section says the Alabama players love to read this kind of stuff. And I do think that's, to a certain extent, probably true, that it's hard to stay motivated, especially during the offseason. You know, the weight program is a challenge. You know, you're doing those squats on Sunday, you're doing the big lift days. I mean, it's hard to stay motivated in that regard. So anything like this that just allows you to kind of climb back up and get a little more focused, I think even as a player, you kind of like the ability to sort of reignite yourself with this a little bit, probably.
Right, but to them, you know, with their strength and conditioning part, they're sitting there, they're lifting, and, you know, they're doing, 315 on the incline, and guy says, you know, they say we're not as good as we were last year again. Here we go. Didn't we just go through this all again? So he's gone through this so many times with the, I don't want to say the disrespect, but just how to turn that in the media into motivation for his players and his coaching staff. He does it better than anybody.
Speaking of weight rooms and strength and conditioning, that's also the subject of item number 2 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And a pretty interesting message coming out of the University of Florida after a weekend spent with the brand new strength and conditioning coach Nick Savage down there in Gainesville. A lot of the Florida players all essentially took to Twitter to say something close to the same thing. SEC Country was able to kind of grab a lot of these together. We'll kind of show you what some of the Florida players are saying about the work they've done with Coach Savage. LaMichael Pirine says he got the animal out of me today, pushed me to limits I never thought I could reach. Jake Allen, one of the quarterbacks, said, never worked so hard in my life. Boshawn Joseph saying, I'm dead. Emory Jones, maybe the potential starter quarterback, saying, you got me today. I give it to you. You're all about that life. On and on we go here.
You know what? Just work hard. We don't need you going on social media talking about how you're working hard. Just do it. Like, what is all this grandstanding about? You know what I'm saying? So when you're lifting weights, you're a college athlete, you're supposed to be lifting weights. Yes, we get it's tough. It's supposed to be a military type feel. To me, and as a Georgia fan, honestly, rooting for Georgia, I think it's great for college football for Florida to be good again. Yeah, where Florida was this year, it's not great for college football if Florida can get back there. I don't know that it's going to be this year, maybe a couple years, but you get the Georgia-Florida rivalry cooking again. You know, the West is not always going to be this far superior than the East. I thought when Mullen took the job and went back to where a lot of people thought he belonged all along, I think you maybe start to see a little balance of power shifting back towards the East. It's not going to happen overnight, but if Florida can get back to where they were a couple years ago, I think that's a legitimate possibility.
As far as why a lot of these Florida players are tweeting what they tweeted, I think we may have found a reason why. Go back to the introductory press conference when Dan Mullen was announced as the Florida coach, Scott Strickland, and bringing Mullen onto the stage and talking about some of the things that he wanted to see from Mullen. One of the things that he mentioned was strength and conditioning. Let me play a little snippet of that to sort of give you a little bit of a backstory for why so many Florida players tweeting about Coach Savage right now. Take a listen to this.
Dan is going to do a tremendous job of implementing accountability and toughness through a well-coordinated strength and conditioning program.
So that's Dan Mullen there, that's Scott Strickland there, pretty short and sweet. But that was really one of the issues with Jim McElwain, that was thought to be inferior in his sort of previous era as Florida coach, so much so that we've heard tales of some of the Florida players actually paying with their own money for a private trainer away from the Florida program to give them the strength work, the conditioning work they needed to get. So it almost seems like what came from the Florida players over the weekend was almost sort of like a concerted, social media campaign, almost like a PR campaign of, hey, we're actually doing real strength and conditioning right now. I'm not going to tell you that the Florida players were put up to putting this tweet out there, but when so many guys tweet something close to the same message at such a similar time, it almost feels like it's a signal of, hey, things are different now than they used to be.
Right. To your point, that's exactly what I saw. But you look at what happened to Florida last year with all the suspensions, the questions at quarterback, the injury to Del Rio really doesn't get talked about enough because you never really got to see what they were capable of on offense. But the strength and conditioning, absolutely right. We'll go to that opening game against Michigan, right? Now, Michigan's got a couple guys on their defensive line that are going to play on Sundays. They got a first-round guy coming out this year. They were manhandling what was supposed to be the strength of that Florida team, their offensive line. You said, well, maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe Michigan's the greatest team in the world. Turned out neither was true. Florida just kept going down all season long, and there's no doubt strength and conditioning was a big part of that. This, to me, is a PR stunt. I'm not doubting that they're working their tails off, but we don't need to hear about it.
Brian Hutt in the comment section says, just because you shift coaches and move to the East doesn't mean they're just automatically ready to compete. And I think that what Brian speaks is probably true in that it's sort of easier said than done. But I think that messages like this, whether it was a concerted campaign or just something that sort of happened organically, it does speak to the expectation level that exists for Florida fans. This is a program that's hungry to be winning again.
No doubt.
And not just division titles. I mean, listen, Florida's already sent that message during the offseason that we're not going to highlight the division titles in Gainesville the way that Jim McElwain seemed to want to. This is a Florida fan base that wants to get back to the Urban Meyer era, wants to get back to things feeling like the Steve Spurrier era. It's probably going to take time. I don't think for Florida this is an extraordinarily talented roster right now. I think there's a lot of work to be done here. But in the meantime, you've got to show some evidence that things are getting better. So working out harder during the offseason.
Right. That's all you can do at this point.
That's so well said. Right now, that's the only thing you can give to fans.
Right. And what are they doing? Today they announced that they're opening up on the 16th and 17th. Their first 2 days of practice for the first time in years is going to be open to the public. So not only are we lifting weights and getting stronger, come on down and watch us, see us. So, I mean, come on, man. I mean, we see where they're going. And Coach Mullen knows this. It was a nice recruiting period for when he came in and what he had to do. They got the quarterback, assuming Emory Jones is the guy. We know he's sore from working out. We know that much. But, only time will tell. Some people here on the comment board are saying, hey, slow your roll a little bit on Mullen. You're giving him too much credit. I don't think so. I think because of Florida's pedigree, because of the history that they've had of success there, I think he's the right guy for the job. I think he's going to get it turned around sooner than most other coaches could in that same situation.
Esteban Esteves, who's an LSU fan, says they're hyping up Florida on social media just to end up as another failed year. We'll see how that goes. Eric Michael Fairley says the Gators are hungry, and there is always that element of a little bit of new hunger, a little bit of new passion when you bring in a new coaching staff. That exists for a little while, but it only lasts for so long. It only lasts until, you go out there during spring, maybe you don't really show a better quarterback heading into the season than you had last year. Certainly in September or the first couple weeks of the season, a lot of that kind of stuff can kind of wane a bit too if you're not actually showing some additional fire on the football field. So there's some hunger there now because of a new coach, but that only lasts for so long.
Yeah, I thought the comments a couple weeks ago with Coach Mullen kind of throwing some shot at Georgia, some shade at Georgia about the recruiting class. Right, but as a Georgia fan, doesn't part of you want Florida to be good? I mean, you don't want them to be the really. Oh, you're an Ole Miss fan now. I forgot about that.
No part of me wants Florida to be good, but certainly the SEC. Now, from just a sort of an objective, sort of neutral standpoint, if you want to put that hat on for a moment,
right.
The SEC is going to be better. The SEC East is going to be better. If a power like Georgia's battling a power like Florida, you can probably add Tennessee in that mix as well. It's better for the SEC for Florida to be good again. But right now, for a school like Georgia, if you just want to be serious about this, one of the things that Georgia, it was true last year. I think it's still, for the most part, true in 2018. It was also true in 2014 and 2015. Georgia just wasn't good enough to do anything about it. But take advantage of an East where Florida is still a bit down. Right. Tennessee is still a bit down. Now, both these teams may be on the rise and about to get better, but for right now, they still have a lot of problems. So this is a chance for Georgia to be greedy. Feast on the SEC East and put yourself in a position to win SEC championships. That's an opportunity that exists for Georgia right now, because I think that Dan Mullen's still 2 or 3 years away from being a legitimate contender for an SEC championship when you just look at the overall amount of holes on that Florida roster.
I could just imagine before the world's biggest cocktail party next year, Kirby's talking to his team and he just puts all those Twitter comments from the Florida players up on the board, says, guys, we're in trouble. We are in big trouble. These guys have been lifting weights. They've never been sore before. We're in big trouble. So he's going to use it as a motivating tactic. You can use it both ways. But, hey, good for Florida, man. Good for Coach Mullen. I hope it all works out for him. If you're a Florida fan, you can go to practice and see how big these guys are getting.
And then one more point about Florida here, and we'll change the subject. We'll talk about the Tennessee Vols for a moment. The other big thing that comes up a lot during this offseason, Tyler Mann talking about it here when it comes to Emory Jones. This is a Florida team that if it's going to be better in 2018, is almost certainly going to have to rest on a freshman quarterback. And that's, it's a tough spot for Florida here because so many SEC teams have had success with freshman quarterbacks the last couple of seasons. A lot of Florida fans say, well, it's our turn to do that now. That's putting a lot of pressure on Emory Jones.
Yeah, it sure is. And you look at the East as a whole and the different programs. Obviously, Georgia's arrow is pointing way up. South Carolina's arrow is pointing up. They got a superstar coming back who's probably going to be a first-team All-American. The arrows for a lot of schools in the East are pointing up.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tough for a freshman, assuming that he does get the job.
All right, speaking of quarterbacks, let's talk about quarterbacks here with item number 3 on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. And kind of an interesting prediction coming from Blake Morgan, who covers the Vols for SECCountry.com, about how the Tennessee quarterback race may shake out in 2018. A guy that I didn't necessarily think we'd be hearing as the potential winner of this job. Well, Blake Morgan thinks that that guy, Will McBride, has a chance to do that. He says, I would actually lean a little more towards McBride, contingent on his ability to learn the new offense. That's the new offense being implemented by brand new head coach Jeremy Pruitt. I was impressed with how the offense moved with him at the helm against Missouri. It also felt as though the team responded better with him in the huddle. That's a comparison to Jerry Garantano, who was coming out of high school, was probably the more highly regarded prospect and the guy that got the most snaps last season. But it leads me to ask this question. When McBride came in and played last season, it was actually somewhat controversial. Butch Jones burned his red shirt for really what seemed like some inconsequential football. But if McBride, who used that experience to become the Tennessee starter in 2018, has Butch Jones actually done Tennessee a favor if that's the way this ends up working out?
I think the only reason he got that opportunity is because of his intangibles off the field. And you heard it in the comments there talking about his leadership ability. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
When I watched Garantano play, his body language was awful at times. Now, granted, the Tennessee offense as a whole was awful. They were playing from behind a lot of time. But if you're the quarterback, you got to get in that huddle like Jake Fromm this year, right? He came in, the first game of the season against App State where they just couldn't move the ball. They looked terrible. He came in, boom, commanded their respect. They went right down the field and scored. I think there's a little bit of McBride in him, that kind of leadership that's going to help him.
Well, I certainly think if you're Jeremy Pruitt, you hope that's true, because I think for defensive-minded head coaches, and that's what Pruitt is, there is a pressure to find your offensive coordinator and find your quarterback. Kirby Smart looks like a genius right now. He's one of the top coaches in the SEC. But a lot of that's based on the fact that he found sort of lightning in a bottle of the Jake Fromm at quarterback. I thought that Jim Chaney, the offensive coordinator, had a much better year in year 2 in terms of his play calling. All of a sudden, the entire Georgia program looks better because the defensive-minded head coach Kirby Smart found some success with the quarterback. For Jeremy Pruitt, who we know is a good recruiter and we know is going to probably build a good defense there in Knoxville eventually, it's the same kind of blueprint. Either you find your quarterback or you don't. And if 3 years from now we're saying, well, Jeremy Pruitt in Tennessee still haven't found their quarterback, then it's probably going to be a lot like Will Muschamp at Florida, where eventually the era comes to an end without Pruitt having the kind of success that he or Tennessee fans want him to have.
Right, and don't forget that they're changing offensive plans here. Helton's the new coach there. It's going to be a pro-style offense. I think that might suit McBride's skill set a little bit better than Garantano, and maybe that also plays into the decision here.
Let me get some comments. Teresa Stewart says, Tennessee is coming back. Shannon Baker disagrees, saying Tennessee's at least 3 or 4 years away from being any kind of threat. Wayne and Lily Parrott saying Jeremy Pruitt going to have a great year and take the SEC East. Daniel Creamer also kind of weighing in to laugh about Tennessee. And so, Hans, you kind of get the sense of how we do this here on SEC Country Live. Wide-ranging opinions on all sides, from Tennessee fans who say, you know what, the ball is going to shock some people this year, to Vol haters saying this is going to be at least a 3 or 4 year project. The opinion's kind of all over the place when it comes to Tennessee right now.
You know, for me, they just kind of lost their way. You know, they've made some really bad hires.
Yeah.
I mean, and when you do that, and I think they're kind of the blueprint of what not to do. I mean, really, if you're going to have an established coach like they had there who had tremendous success, and you're going to get rid of him, and it's not the right guy, and then it's not the right guy again, that's how you get to where you're at right now. So I do think it's a 3 to 4 year process.
Brian Wright says Tennessee's the only team in more trouble than Florida. I think that Brian means in the SEC East, and there's a sense in which I sort of agree with that, maybe said it a little bit different way. I think that Jeremy Pruitt over the long haul is probably a better recruiter than Dan Mullen is, but you got to have success to be able to maximize that. I think in the short term, I think that Dan Mullen's actually set up for more success for Florida in year 1, year 2. For Jeremy Pruitt, I don't know that he's set up for the same kind of year 1, year 2 success that Dan Mullen might be. Now, neither team may win more than 6 or 7 games, but in terms of who has the better roster right now, I'd say it probably is Florida more so than Tennessee.
I would agree with that 100%. When I look at Tennessee last year and try to figure out what they did well, you know, outside of the running game at times early in the year, nothing. I mean, there wasn't anything that they could hang their hat on. They were in such disarray, and if that's when that's the situation, the only way to start over is a clean slate, and that's where they're at right now.
Chad Robinson also says nobody in the East is touching Georgia for many years, and for the rebuild that's going on at Tennessee with Jeremy Pruitt and the sort of overhaul going on at Florida with Dan Mullen, I mean, that is a sort of a different context of this conversation. It has been a long time. You probably have to go back to the Tim Tebow Florida teams of 2008, 2009 to see an SEC East team that was capable of competing for, you know, an SEC national championship, you know, type program. You didn't have that in really any of the years in which Florida was winning back-to-back. Missouri was winning back-to-back. Right. Even the 2011, 2012 Georgia teams, you know, Georgia was close to Alabama in 2012, but that was still a program that had some problems. This is the best East program we've seen in quite some time. I'm talking about Georgia here. For Tennessee and Florida, that is a lot to think about.
It's been 10 years. I mean, the balance has been in the West now for 10 years, without question. And I think, I know that at some point it's going to switch back. It just can. It's human nature. I mean, it's the way it's going to be. And I think we're seeing the beginning of that. And am I putting a little bit too much into Coach Mullen going to Florida? I don't think so. I think he can coach. I think he can recruit. I think it's going to take some time, but I think you're going to have a couple powerhouses in the East in the next couple years.
All right, speaking of the Georgia Bulldogs, let's talk about item number 4 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. It involves the Georgia Bulldogs. And, you know, the one comment that kind of comes up over and over again in our comment section from folks who are not Georgia fans, and I think this is probably a fair statement to make, is that Georgia has got a lot to replace this upcoming season. Just start rattling off the names. I mean, the stats speak for themselves, but think about Nick Chubb and Sony Michel on the offensive side of the ball. Guys like Davin Bellamy, Lorenzo Carter on the defensive side of the ball. Really the whole defense. I mean, Butkus Award-winning linebacker Roquan Smith, kind of on and on you could go. And that is a tough challenge for Georgia. But there is at least one school of thought out there that in terms of replacing the 2 running backs, Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, things might be actually a little bit, I don't want to say easier than they appear, but the situation may be a little different than it appears. Because the one thing that the new incoming freshman running backs, guys like Zamir White and James Cook, are going to have to go along with returning player like DeAndre Swift, that Chubb and Michel did not have for most of their time at Athens, was an outstanding offensive line. Here's Dog Nation's recruiting insider Jeff Sintel to explain more about that.
On the message board this week, Brandon, somebody was making the comparison about can James Cook and Zamir White do what Sony Michel and Nick Chubb did. Well, if you look at the ratings and the pure talent that's going to be coming to Athens, I think everybody there is in the same weight class, in the same kind of category. But the main thing that will be different for both Cook and even Zamir White is, remember, John Theus was the only 5-star that guys like Chubb and Michel got to run behind. There could be a line formed in Georgia in the next 2 years where a bulk of the carries for both of those young men might come behind a line that includes 3 5-star prospects. And I'm not even counting the freshman wire-to-wire starter, Andrew Thomas.
So in the class of 2017, the class of 2018, Georgia loaded up on 4- and 5-star offensive linemen. Are you buying the notion that the collection of that talent for the offensive line makes it easier for the nation's #1 running back, Zamir White, nation's #3 running back, James Cook, along with DeAndre Swift, to match what Nick Chubb and Sony Michel did over the course of their 4 years in Athens?
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, that's everything with this. And these are guys that can catch the football as well. And don't forget about, you mentioned everybody leaving. Who you do have coming back is Jake Fromm. Who knows what he's going to be like next year with another year under his belt, another offseason of spring practices. I think one thing from a recruiting standpoint that hasn't been talked about with Georgia's ability to go out and get these two guys again, as far as the top running backs in the country, what happened last year with Swift, is what he's selling these guys.
Yeah.
These are guys who plan to play on Sundays in the National Football League. And it's almost as if the sales pitch is, hey, my question would be, so you got Zamir White already coming. I'm Cook. I'm James Cook. Why would I want to come too? Here's the deal. Look at what just happened with Michel and Chubb. You guys are going to split carries, which is not what kids want to hear, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? When you go to the draft podium, you're going to be fresh. You're going to be viewed upon differently by other team scouts, and it's going to help you get into a better position and get you more of that money. I honestly believe that that's part of the pitch, because otherwise, how do you get these guys coming in year after year after year unless they're all buying into the same plan?
And maybe an additional aspect of that pitch is better stats because of the Oak Tree offensive lineman get a chance to run behind. Here's a little more from Jeff Sintel on that point.
I would imagine getting the chance to run behind the Georgia line as it is forming up right now might have even padded a third of a yard per carry to those career rush averages for both Nick Chubb and Sony Michel.
Now let's play devil's advocate here for a moment as well, because the folks who are not Georgia fans can be screaming in the comment section. It's still not as easy to do as we just described it to be, though. You've still got to get some of those offensive linemen, those 4- and 5-star guys like Cade Mays from Knoxville and Jamari Salyer from Atlanta. They got to pan out. They got to live up to the hype, and the running backs have to as well. So for the non-Georgia fan out there, it's also worth pointing out that this is not exactly as easily said as it is done, but the potential is certainly there.
Sure, and you look at Alabama, the success that they've had, the blueprint that Kirby brought over as far as the style of offense that Georgia wants to run, and how they've been able to get running back after running back after running back and split carries and still keep them in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy. And they've been able to do that with offensive line play, because you can recruit those guys. Ask Mike. Mike will tell you, you want to pass protect or you want to run block?
Right.
They want to run block.
Right. Sure. Jimmy Barnes, by the way, who's a Georgia fan in the comment section, says, BA, when it comes to those folks thinking that Georgia doesn't have any talent coming back, saying, don't correct them. Let them think we don't have anything coming back. So to go back to the rat poison thing, we started the show with it. That's at least one Georgia fan who says, I kind of like the idea of some of these opposing fan bases thinking that there's not going to be any talent left over in Athens, that when Chubb and Michel left, they took all the success with them. That's a Georgia fan who says, maybe we can sneak up on somebody this year.
That's where you want to be. I mean, when you're Alabama and year after year they're talking about this, you don't have to say anything, because you know the guys that you've recruited over the years. You've shown the ability to coach them up year after year, and I know this is early in Kirby's regime, but I think he's shown in the last couple of years that, yes, he is that guy. Not only can he bring them in, but he coaches them up, and they're ready to play on Saturday. So I expect a lot of those guys, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, that Georgia fans, a lot of SEC football fans didn't get a chance to see a lot of this year. You're going to become a first-name basis with them early on in the season.
Tony Elam, who has a Tennessee logo in his Facebook profile picture, so he knows Jim Chaney going back to the time when Chaney was offensive coordinator there in Knoxville, says Chaney's not going to have 2 good years. He's going to disappoint eventually. I mean, what do you think about Chaney? I mean, I have obviously critical of Jim Chaney in year 1. I predicted him to have a better year in year 2, and I think that he did. I don't really have a problem with Jim Chaney as Georgia's offensive coordinator.
Sony Michel, second half of the title game. Where does he go? I mean, what happened there?
That's a very fair question. For those of you that may not be up to speed on what Hans brings up there. By the way, it's good to have Hans Heiser in for Mike Johnson today. But what he brings up is maybe too many carries for Nick Chubb, not enough carries for Sony Michel. That was critical. That was a criticism that Jim Chaney received for the national championship game. I feel like a lot of that kind of stuff is sort of more easily understood in retrospect. That when you look back on the game, hey, we didn't give enough carries to Sony Michel. He was dominating this football game.
Right.
In the moment, though, I don't know how quickly you pick up on something like that. Though, you know what I'm saying? Is it the kind of thing that you can see happening in the moment, or are we all more aware of that after the fact?
My Twitter feed from the national championship game, I was on in the second quarter. Okay. I said, why in the world are they continuing to rub Chubb? And it's not an indictment on Nick Chubb. He's a leader of the football team, a tremendous football player, going to play in the National Football League. But for whatever reason, Alabama had him figured out. They knew when he was on the field what Georgia was going to run, where he was going to be, and he wasn't making plays. It was the exact opposite for Michelle, and we just never gave him the opportunities he needed in the second half.
One of our great commenters in the show, Hans, is Cliff Nelson. He's a big LSU fan. He's already excited about Georgia going to Baton Rouge in the month of October. He says Jake Fromm, whose Twitter handles Jake from State Farm, says he's going to need State Farm after playing in Death Valley, essentially saying he's going to need to make an insurance call. So those LSU fans already getting excited about making a nasty home environment for Georgia when the Dogs go there in November.
That'll be fun. You got to figure that they'll schedule that at nighttime. That's what they like to do.
Yeah, that's going to be quite an atmosphere for the. I mean, listen, that is one of those games that. I mean, there are a few of these already. You know, we talked a lot of Florida, Tennessee a moment ago. Those two teams playing in September. You know, Auburn, Washington. You want to get excited about that already. Georgia going to LSU in October. That's one of those short list of games that I think that a lot of our audience is already getting.
I've never been. About. I've never been. It's
yeah.
one of the few places in the SEC I've never been. I would love to go. And if you're an LSU fan, you're thinking about getting your home, your season tickets for this year. You got Georgia and Alabama coming to town. It's not bad.
Good home slate for sure. All right, we'll talk more LSU throughout the program here. Good to have you with us here today on SEC Country Live. Let me talk some South Carolina for right now, though. It's item number 5 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And one of the most electric players for me for the start of the 2017 season was the South Carolina receiver and kick returner Tebow Samuel. I say start of the season because, as you'll all remember, Samuel suffers an injury that knocks him out for the rest of the season. But there is some reason to think that Samuel is starting to work his way back. First of all, he tweets this out, a warning to the rest of the SEC. Did you miss me? Welcome back, Uno. That's obviously a reference to his Twitter handle and nickname. And a little bit of work from the South Carolina video department to show you that right now, Tebow Samuel's moving around pretty good. Let's take a look at this. So first of all, you got to get the Under Armour cleats in there, right?
Sure.
You know, and by the way, South Carolina's video department is the best in the SEC right now. Even a relatively simple video like this is actually pretty well done. Kind of cool, kind of a sort of a stripped down raw deal here, but that looks like a pretty healthy Tebow Samuel for me, Hans.
Yeah, Tebow Samuel, a lot of people don't know, is 45 years old. He's been in Columbia for about 10 years now. Listen, this guy to me was the best offensive playmaker in the Southeastern Conference last year, 2 years ago, right? He gets hurt early on. It seemed like a deal breaker. How about credit to South Carolina and Will Muschamp for hanging in there all season long? You know, Edwards becomes the de facto number 1. Guess what? He doesn't have to be the 1 anymore. He's the 2. South Carolina, man, I mean, listen, I don't know that they're going to go out and win 9 or 10 games, but as far as the process and where they were from when Muschamp started in the direction that, you know, the defense is always going to be there. This has an opportunity with a guy like Samuel on the field. If he's 100% healthy all season long, they're going to sneak up on some folks.
And you mentioned him as a wide receiver. That's obviously an important part of what he does. I think he's also dynamic in the kick returning game. And listen,
is he first-team All-American?
I think that he has a very good chance of being, some sort of honor like that, at least very highly regarded in the All-SEC category, because this is a South Carolina team that is going to show up in every single one of these, way too early top 25s. I think there'll be an official preseason top 25 as well. But in terms of the media stuff that we like to kick around on shows like this, South Carolina is going to be in all of them. If they're already a top 25 team, I think a healthy Tebow Samuel, which a lot of these writers are going to consider, but you see visual evidence of it right there, I think it makes South Carolina more dangerous. You said you're not going to necessarily go out there and predict them to win 9 or 10 games. 10 is a big number.
10's a big number.
Is 9 a possibility for South Carolina? I absolutely believe that it is. I absolutely believe that it is.
And you're talking about Clemson, Georgia. That's 2 tough ones right there. I'm not familiar with the rest of their non-conference schedule this year.
Well, they obviously go to Clemson at the end of the season.
But either way, I mean, Tebow Samuel, not only that, it's his leadership. I saw an interview with him last year after he got hurt, and he was just giving so much kudos to the coaching staff and the players that were still on the field. But like, look, man, we got a great group of guys around here. I think they're going to surprise some people, and sure enough, they did.
So 9-4 last year. Let's see who the 4 losses were. Lost at Texas A&M. That's a game back in.
They won a ton of close games.
Yeah.
Every close game they found a way to win.
And I'm going to give credit to our buddy Christopher Smith, who you've seen on video at SEC Country before. Yes, Kentucky did. They lost 23-13 to Kentucky. But Christopher Smith on Twitter the other night actually made the same point you did, that, hey, when you have a lot of close wins in a given year, it's sort of hard to replicate that in year two. In this particular case, though, I'm going to give a little credit here for what they get back, what they have from a recruiting standpoint. Guys, like J.C. Horn and Rick Sandage from their 2018 recruiting class, some of those guys are going to play this year. So I want to sort of feel like you can sort of mitigate and kind of get around some of the dangerous close wins from a year ago, because of the fact that you've got an influx of talent, both in terms of returning injuries and incoming freshmen, that sort of give you a chance to sort of beef up your roster here a little bit.
Right. And, the challenges that come with recruiting in the state of South Carolina, to hear Will Muschamp's comments and to kind of put things into perspective, the state as a whole has just a little bit more people than the city of Atlanta.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
And Clemson's
and
getting
fight with Clemson.
Clemson's getting most of those guys. So they have to do the majority of their recruiting out of state.
Yeah.
And you're talking about going into North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia. I mean, they got their work cut out for him. He's done an outstanding job in the 2 years he's been there.
Esteban Estevez says it's a huge pickup for South Carolina. Yeah, it almost is like a pickup. It's almost like a trade deadline deal or something like that if you follow professional sports.
Sure.
To bring a guy like that and have him on your roster, I think that's a really interesting step for South Carolina. I think the video is pretty cool. It kind of gets you excited if you're a Gamecocks fan, or if you're just a general SEC fan, about another dynamic playmaker being healthy in this league for 2018. Let's turn our attention back to Alabama Crimson Tide here for a moment. Right on number 6 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. A little bit of a news roundup when it comes to the Tide. Let me start with Matt Zenitz from AL.com. Does a pretty good job of covering that program, talking about a number of potential defensive line coaching candidates. Obviously, we know that Carl Dunbar is leaving that job at Alabama. There was some thought that maybe he wasn't getting it done in recruiting. Potential replacements. Well, Matt Zenitz wrote about some of the guys you could see him here. Charlie Partridge, former FAU head coach. He's apparently interviewed for the job. He's the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line coach. And then you've also got Lance Thompson coming back for another tour of duty potentially with Nick Saban there as well. The one thing we know here, whether it's one of these guys, we also talked about Jones the other day, the former recruiting coordinator at LSU, the guy that Alabama hires. This is going to be a guy that has strong ties to recruiting. It's one thing to say, well, this guy coached in the NFL, or this guy used to be a head coach at FAU. That's one thing, and that's fine. But we know,
fine, right?
But we know that Nick Saban is not going to fill any coaching position without a black belt A-list recruiter. I think that Partridge and certainly Lance Thompson both have a chance to be that.
Right, and this is something, if you're a football coach, you want to put on your resume. If you have aspirations of being a head coach, a coordinator one day, you're the defensive line coach at Alabama, you're putting guys in the NFL, and you're a part of that recruitment process. You do that for a couple years, just like the gentleman, Carl, who just did it, who's now with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Sky's the limit. Now, he was an NFL guy before, but this has got to be a very sought-after job. I mean, the list is about 10 different guys that are actually going to have sit-down interviews for this position.
Another one of those guys is Travis Jones, who was with Saban, as I said, at LSU. He's recruiting coordinator there, has been in the NFL ever since then, left to go with Saban to the Dolphins when he took that job in 2005, and then basically became an NFL coach after that. That's another guy that's got strong recruiting ties. Now, potentially making things easier for the coaches recruiting for Alabama is a nice new addition to the Alabama football facility. Now, I'm curious if you think this is a good idea. I guess I'm sort of coming around on this. So Alabama is adding a barber shop. I think we have some photographic evidence of this. Alabama football, this is their official Instagram account, showing the barber's chair here. It's called Bama Cut.
It's a nice chair.
It's a nice barber chair, very kind of cool with the leather, very, very manly with the sort of mahogany finish on the armrest, the dark leather for the chair. What do you think about the Bama Cuts barbershop opening the football facility? Is this a good idea?
You know what this is? I saw this and I immediately picked up on it. Nick Saban doesn't want his players in barbershops hearing how great they are.
I like that.
He wants his guys getting their hair cut in there with guys just saying, "You ain't nothing." Yeah, let me get behind there. Yeah, you're nothing.
That's it's a chance to control that message, because the barbershops can be a place where you could hear some different messages potentially. I think that you may be kind of onto something on that.
It's just these millennials, and it's not a shot at them. It's just different things resonate with them. And I think, Coach Saban, oddly enough, he identifies with these kids, as does Dabo Swinney, as does, Kirby Smart.
Well, I think that I probably wouldn't have been as into this being potentially a good idea until about a year or two ago I moved. I'd lived in the same place for a long time, had got my hair cut in the same place, and I don't have a ton of hair left anymore. But and I've been getting my hair cut forever at the same place. When you move and you got to find a new place to get your hair cut, it's actually not that easy to find a place to get your hair cut. So
you're right.
if you're somewhere in Florida, if you're somewhere in Louisiana, Alabama recruits nationwide. You show up in Tuscaloosa, you're like, where am I able to get my my cut, my fade? I think the kids call it. Where am I able to get my fade done? And Alabama says, you're not going to go anywhere. You can just come right here. Bama Cuts has got you taken care of. That's actually a pretty good idea.
Well, most teams have 3 or 4 guys in the locker room that are the designated barbers. They're cutting each other's hair, and you got to wait in line. You got to set an appointment. It's a big time deal. I mean, maybe not for you and me, but to have it right there and to be able to go do it, they will not be the last team to do something.
I'm going to give this is my hot take for the day. A barber shop in the football facility is a better idea than a DJ in the weight room, because we've heard some of that kind of stuff as well. It's like, oh, so and so school's got a DJ in the weight room now. Barber shop in the football complex, I think, is a bigger selling point than there's a DJ in the weight room. Because, I mean, how cool is that, really?
Well, I think that both of those positions that you just mentioned, I think it's a stretch for those to be full-time jobs for some individual. Why not make them both? Kind of compound the position, and then you cut your hairstylist by day or by night, and then you're a DJ by day. So you can actually do both.
Vince Blank in the comment section says, it's about time y'all talked about the Tide. Now, when we talk about Alabama, we got 1,000 people that say, why do y'all talk about Alabama all the time and quit talking about Alabama? When we talk about another SEC team for 5 minutes, you guys got guys like Vince Blank saying it's about time you start talking about the Crimson Tide again. This is one of those examples where it's very hard to win.
Didn't we start off with number 1 talking about Alabama?
Hey, we've got new viewers checking in every couple minutes.
Thank you for
during
watching
the show.
show.
Yeah, we appreciate you being with us. Glenn Michael Gooch also says, Bama's been crushing everybody's dreams, and now the Bama players will be able to crush some of those dreams with sort of a freshly coiffed hairstyle as well.
Right, they'll be looking good. Jalen Hurts, maybe he'll finally get a haircut.
He did get a haircut.
Oh, he did?
Yeah,
I missed that.
A few weeks ago, the dreads are gone for Jalen Hurts. This guy's all business now.
Is he?
This guy's like Fortune 500. He's ready to go.
It went so fast, I didn't get a chance to read the comment who it was from. Guy said, great. So now Alabama's giving players cars and haircuts.
Oh, Lord. I'm not going to.
I just thought it was funny.
I'm going to leave that one alone. Nonetheless, let's talk about item number 7 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And there was a comment that got my attention this weekend from a Major League Baseball general manager about a former SEC star in football. It's Sandy Alderson, the New York Mets general manager, and here captured via Twitter is Alderson's prediction about the future of former Florida quarterback, current New York Mets prospect Tim Tebow. Alderson says, I think he's going to play in the major leagues. Now, we don't talk a ton of baseball here on this show, but when the subject of Tebow during spring training comes up, I got to admit, I'm kind of fascinated by the fact that the Mets GM would kind of put himself out there in that regard.
I don't know what this is all about. I don't know if they're trying to sell tickets. They spent a lot of money, the Mets did, in free agency this year, something they typically don't do. They went out and got a third baseman, right fielder, and Frazier, and re-signed Jay Bruce. But I think there's going to be a lot of interest around that team. So it's not like a last-place seller team where you're just trying to get interest in the club. Mets are a little bit exciting. But this guy's a career 226 hitter. He's 30 years old. He's going to be 31 in August. That ship has sailed. And look, I'm the biggest Tim Tebow fan in the world. I think what he stands for, what he's accomplished, and how this was a dream of his, and he's going to go out and give it everything he has to try to accomplish it. I think it's a great thing that he's, as a role model. He's, saying, look, this is something I've always wanted to do when I was a kid. I'm going to set the example. I'm going to go out and try to do it. But he's not a big league player. He's not. He never will be. I don't know what this guy's talking about.
So, Michael, one of our producers, he's a big Mets fan. We talk about this from time to time.
Well, I didn't know that. I'm sorry, Michael.
We showed some video of this on a lot during the summer last year. I would be a lot more critical of Tebow as a baseball player, except he hits home runs against guys who are trying. Like, there are guys out there pitching for their life, and Tebow hits a home run against him. It'd be one thing if he was striking out every single time. From the looks of things, it seems like he's a good enough player to be out there. And I'm not telling you he's the next, Giancarlo Stanton or something like that.
He's not.
But he's certainly not embarrassing himself.
He played at high A. High A is
where
like 19-year-olds playing high A.
But that's where every future major leaguer plays at one point in time. Very few players skip high A.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope he's a starting left fielder for the Mets by the end of the season, but I just don't see it. He's 30 years old. There's no upside. He is what he is.
Now that's an interesting point that maybe he's a little older than the actual major league prospects would be. Tebow, by the way, talked about his major league future, or at least the potential major league future. Here's a little bit of the former Florida QB.
My goal isn't about what's going to happen one day. My goal is to focus on this day and our outfield work, my training session, getting to know all the new coaches and working as hard as I can. And I think one of the important things about being an athlete is being able to lock in and have tunnel vision, because I can't worry about one day if I'm going to play in the bigs or not. I think I got into this because I love it, I'm passionate about it, and I think that for me, it's being able to lock in and have tunnel vision regardless of what team I'm on, wherever they decide to put me. I'm going to be able to lock in and give it everything I have.
That is so awesome. One of the best things I saw in sports television last year was whatever the show is with Stephen A. Smith. I think it's still First Take. Tebow was on there, and for reasons unknown, Stephen A. Smith begins to attack Tim Tebow about pursuing a career in baseball. What are you doing? You're not a good baseball player. Why are you doing this? And he just stopped. He says, whoa. He said, Steve, I would hope that if you had someone in your life that was passionate and really wanted to do something, that you would encourage them to go out and try that instead of belittling them and blah, blah, blah. It just absolutely put Stephen A. Smith in his place. I've never seen anybody do it before. Yeah. And Stephen A. Smith had no idea how to respond to him. And I said, you know what? Good for you, man. Just keep playing baseball, and I wish him nothing but the best.
Bo Molinari's got a funny and both kind of interesting comment in the comment section. He says, it's too bad that Tebow may play baseball. The XFL needs him. I mean, what would you rather see? More of Tebow in baseball, or maybe Tebow as a quarterback in the XFL?
Both. I want to see him everywhere. Yeah. I want Tebow doing SEC football coverage. I want him on First Take. I want him in left field for the Port St. Lucie Mets. I want him in the XFL. Yeah. I mean, really, he's great for sports. He's great for competition. He's great for kids.
My sort of final point on this, entire subject is the idea of people say, well, this is just a publicity stunt for baseball. Have you seen baseball lately? Baseball could use a couple publicity stunts. And I say that as a guy who loves the sport, grew up, watching baseball every single night, still like baseball. But it's not exactly the most top-of-mind subject out there for a lot of young people. So the idea that you could bring in a guy like Tim Tebow and generate a little excitement for the sport, the team specifically, it's not a terrible idea, actually.
No, if there was ever a brawl, you can best believe that Tebow would be the first guy out there pulling people off the pile. He would be the guy pulling people off the pile, like Dale Murphy used to be for the Braves. You never see Dale Murphy in a fight. He's pulling people off the pile.
That's a good idea. By the way, some comments coming in on the idea of the Alabama barbershop. Most of you think it's kind of a good idea. Greg Steele, who's a Florida fan, had a funny idea. He said maybe that's barber poison, obviously kind of taking a kind of a page out of the rat poison playbook. Kevin Chapman, though, who's a Georgia fan, he says it's a great idea. He thinks Georgia should copy it. Iman Lee says there are actually more teams that kind of have their own personal barber than you might realize. And then Robbie Eversole in the comment section says it's actually the coaches who get the most benefit from that, because they can just sort of slide in there, get their hair cut, not have to leave the facility. So it seems like, and it's very hard for our audience to be unanimous on almost anything, but it seems like there's some unanimity here. People think the idea of the Alabama barbershop is actually a pretty good one.
Yeah, but I don't know if I'm the barber if I want to cut Saban's hair. I don't know if I'm ready to shoulder that responsibility.
Let me tell you something.
You know what I mean?
Do we have any picture of Saban at all we can throw up on the screen? If you think just one person's doing Saban's hair, you are kidding yourself. It takes an army of people to get this color right, to get this,
You are so right, Brandon.
You got to comb it back just perfectly. I mean, yeah. Y'all think Donald Trump's doing something fishy with his hair?
He's hanging on to what he's got.
Look at this guy's hair. This strategy required to make it look like he has a full head of brown hair.
Now, that shot before, he had a little gray in there, so he could be going natural.
No. I mean, he may have been a day or two late to get... now, this is obviously my opinion, but it could have been that in this particular picture right here, he's a day or two late in terms of getting the juice put back in. But this guy is not going out natural. Yeah. If this guy was doing natural hair, he looked like George Washington.
And the eyebrows match, so this is definitely a yes.
So if you think just one person's cutting Nick Saban's hair, it takes like a team of like 6 people to get that done. Half the analysts they have hired are just people that probably work on Nick Saban's hair. But nonetheless, let's move on and look at item number 8 here on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list. And speaking of former SEC quarterbacks in the news, here's another example that I thought this was pretty funny. As we mentioned before, our buddy Mike Johnson not with us today because he was at the Daytona 500 yesterday traveling back from the race, and not the only former SEC star there. Former Tennessee quarterback Peyton Manning also there as well. Had a chance to ride the pace car. He's actually driving the pace car, believe it or not. And this kind of gets a little bit funny here. We have some audio from Manning inside the pace car. First of all, maybe a little nervous, but also classic Manning in a couple respects. Let me let you hear the first clip here as he talks about how different it is kind of being in this situation than situations he's found himself in the past.
Hey Peyton, it's CW. How's it going out there? But you got a death grip on that steering wheel, man.
Well, I tell you, I've been upright. I've been on my back. I've never been sideways before. So this is a little different, Daryl.
So what he's referencing there is, and Hans, I don't even know how much you know about NASCAR, but the track is like embanked, right? Right. Like driving the pace car around that, and you can kind of get the sense that he was a little bit squirmish about the, or squeamish, maybe that's the right word, a little squeamish about the idea that he's sort of driving on the embankment there.
Well, I trust Peyton Manning in, on a NASCAR track like this because you're looking straight ahead, you're figuring, but where Peyton would concern me is in day-to-day traffic because he's got the spinal fusion, so he's like Batman. If he has to look side to side, he can't really do that. So I would be concerned about being behind Peyton Manning on like Peachtree Road, but not so much at Daytona.
Well, listen, as much as you may have concerns about that, the one area in which you don't have any concerns about Peyton Manning is doing the perfect NASCAR thing and making sure you get the sponsor mention in there.
Right.
Manning nails that like a pro. Take a listen to this.
I don't know if you know this or not, but there's an 18 on the side of your car, and I think they want you to stay out and run a few laps.
I don't think so. I'm just going to kind of stay in my lane, Daryl, and kind of get in. This is not about me. These guys behind me are in the show, and what a cool environment to be a part of. I mean, these cars behind me, I'm looking at them right now, and obviously for Alex to be on the pole in his first race here in the 88 Nationwide car is pretty cool.
I mean, we know that Nationwide is one of his big sponsors, and they just sort of slips it in. Yeah, to see this guy back there in the 88 Nationwide car, I mean, that's classic NASCAR, but that's Peyton Manning being, I mean, like legitimately the perfect pitch man in all of sports.
Right. Is he in the booth next year with McDonough?
I think somewhere, yeah, either whether it be CBS or ESPN or, I mean, he's going to be calling games somewhere, I would think. And probably Monday Night Football may be the best place for him.
So Gruden, he was making $6.5 million. He was the highest paid employee, ESPN had, allocated to broadcasting. I mean, is Manning a guy who's $6.5 million who's never done the job before? I mean, Romo had tremendous success. Yeah.
I mean, I don't, if you're Peyton Manning, you're already worth, $100 million, whatever. I mean, I don't think you're getting out of bed unless it's listen, that's a great job, but Peyton Manning doesn't need any job. You're going to have to pay him a lot of money to get him to even consider it, right?
Right. But I think that's where his future is. I think ultimately he ends up in a John Elway type role. I just think he's such a competitive guy. He loves the sport so much that he's going to get in a front office position at some point.
Let me let you hear one more from Manning. This is pretty funny as some of these race cars start to inch a little closer, maybe too close to comfort for Mr. Manning here.
Alex just tried to pass me, so I didn't realize these guys are going to be quite so close on me.
That's the welcoming committee. Welcome to the race.
Evidently.
Kelly Easby Smith in the comment section says, love Peyton Manning. And, listen, obviously Tennessee fans love Manning. Some of the folks who cheer for other schools in our comment section, maybe, they're not as big of a Manning fan, but there is an element of likability that he does bring to the table. One of the reasons why he might have the chance to command millions of dollars as a broadcaster, continues to sort of, command that kind of money as a pitchman is. Even in the midst of sort of a kind of scary situation, driving a pace car with all these race cars behind you, this guy still pulls off the personality part of the game.
Absolutely. I mean, whenever you want to get an idea of what people are like, go watch their SNL. If they were ever, showcased on SNL live television, he was brilliant. And I'm not overstating that. What he was asked to do as an athlete in an avenue that he's not familiar with, to go out there, and he was outstanding.
Kevin Chapman, by the way, in the comment section, to bring up a serious point, says that Peyton needs to take Philip Fulmer's job and be AD of Tennessee. That is that kind of interesting thing in terms of influence on the previous Tennessee coaching hire. There was some thought, and it was sort of quiet and not a whole lot made of it, that maybe Manning was one of the people pushing Schiano for the Tennessee job, and maybe at some point in time Manning's future is working with Jimmy Haslam running the Cleveland Browns. But I do think there are a pocket of Tennessee fans who would like to see, Manning's future be more in terms of influence on the Tennessee program as opposed to maybe taking some sort of NFL president's job.
No doubt about it. But I mean, an athletic director in the Southeastern Conference with no experience, that's tough, man. I mean, I don't care who you are. I mean, that's a lot of Those are big shoes to fill.
Cliff Nelson, our LSU fan, says, Peyton's a Louisiana boy. Of course he excels at everything. That's funny stuff there from Cliff Nelson in the comment section. By the way, let's talk some Texas A&M Aggies here with item number 9 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And I have mixed feelings about the point that I'm about to make. First of all, I love the way that A&M continues to sort of generate interest and create talking points, but this particular talking point is one that I've gotten a little bit tired of. Tim Brewster, who has been one of the more outspoken assistants for Jimbo Fisher since Fisher took the Texas A&M job, took to Twitter this week to kind of mock the in-state rival there for the Aggies, the Texas Longhorns. The backstory here is A&M had offered a 2019 prospect. The very next day, Texas kind of comes in, offers the same player, and Brewster was sort of feeling good about the fact that A&M was sort of first to the party there. What he tweets out here is, some schools just follow. The leader in the state of Texas is Texas A&M, and the ballers know, #facts. So I really like Brewster doing what sort of a hype man assistant coach is supposed to do, which is generate a lot of attention here and kind of generate some good vibes around the Aggies program. I've got no problem with him doing that. But the most tiresome subject of all for me, Hans, though, is this notion of Texas and Texas A&M. They talk about playing, they talk about the rivalry, but they don't actually ever play each other.
Right.
There's some thought that maybe the A&M folks have sort of avoided this intentionally in bowl games before. Either play or don't, but stop talking about each other if you're not going to play.
Right. But it all comes down to recruiting. And so it gets back to my take on this younger group of kids and how do you reach them? It's social media. And whether it's taking digs at another school that's offering you the recruit a scholarship as well, that might be the difference maker. I mean, it really might be. And it's also setting a tone and setting precedent to other kids in the state of Texas that, hey, man, this tight end coach at A&M is pretty cool.
Will Ward in the comment section says, Brewster, that's unprofessional. Do you think it's unprofessional from Brewster? I don't have a problem with that at all. I think
10 years ago, yes. I think in this day and age with social media and how kids get their information and what might be everything's different.
Yeah, I think in terms of generating interest for your program, all is fair there. My issue with Brewster, and this is not unique to him, this is an issue for everybody associated with Texas and Texas A&M. If you're going to talk about each other, I think you've got to play each other.
To your point.
But if you're not going to play each other, then you got to stop talking about each other. Or one or the other.
But, it's out of their hands. I mean, he's a tight end coach. What is he?
But no. These two programs could play tomorrow if they wanted to. They both choose not to because of whatever sort of political reason and everything else. They could play. Now, it's out of Tim Brewster's hands.
That's absurd.
I think especially, they could play tomorrow if they want.
But I think especially in this day and age where you have these non-conference games and A&M's playing in a big one this year, right? They're doing a true home and home, aren't they? It's not a
they're playing Clemson. Yeah, so this is not an issue with Texas A&M being afraid to play anybody.
Right.
They play a tough schedule. They're going to play Clemson here. That's a really tough game. This is an issue with they're going to be passive-aggressive, and it's not just A&M, it's Texas too, but they're going to be passive-aggressive about this rivalry because of the bad feelings about leaving the Big 12 to go to the SEC. This is not about A&M ducking all competition. This is about A&M and Texas sort of deciding when's the right time to play each other. And that's I think, for the average fan, I just think that's really frustrating.
It is. It is nonsense that they don't play, and this whole notion of now with the college football playoff, you can lose a big game early on in the season. I think it helps you in recruiting and it helps build your program when you play these big, non-conference games, especially in a rivalry that's so much at stake between schools like Texas and Texas A&M. That would be the biggest thing in the world in that state.
All right, let's do item number 10 here on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And I want to lay out this scenario to you, and I want you to tell me how you feel about it. There is sort of a growing conversation happening around the Auburn basketball program, a program that's had a sensational season up to this point in time. Did lose on Saturday to South Carolina in an upset, and also dealing with an injury here to Anthony McLemore that's going to cause some problems for the tournament run. This has been a very good Auburn team, even knocking on the door of potentially being a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. But that sort of dark cloud of suspicion when it comes to NCAA issues, you've had a couple players ruled ineligible back during the beginning of the season. That dark cloud continues to hang over the program, so much so that Pete Thamel, who covers a lot of NCAA issues for Yahoo Sports, used to work for Sports Illustrated, he goes on the Feinbaum show last week, and he sort of dropped what I thought was a pretty provocative opinion about the future of Bruce Pearl. Let me show you the tweet from the Feinbaum show. What Thamel says is, I would be stunned if Bruce Pearl is the Auburn coach next year. I can't wrap my mind around him being back just using common sense, given the fact we know the FBI, I should say, is about to release some more issues about a lot of different college programs. Auburn's already been implicated in that. Chuck Person no longer a coach at Auburn because of this. That's the issue there. Now, Bruce Pearl, for what it's worth, has kind of pushed back on some of this. Here's a quote from Bruce Pearl saying, "We complied enough to still be here," meaning employed. I think so many times when you have an internal investigation, it should be internal. Again, I wouldn't be here coaching if there were greater problems. So he's essentially sort of swatting away the Pete the Mel suggestion and accusation. So let me ask you this. Whether Bruce Pearl is gone at the end of the year or not, there are some just sort of negative comments being made about the Auburn program. But they're better now than they probably would have been with a different coach other than Bruce Pearl.
No doubt.
So is the criticism worth it? Is the potential aftermath in the next few years, is it worth it to be good as Auburn is right now?
Yes. Yes. You know, listen, Bruce Pearl, you can say what you want to say about how he gets things done. I think Chuck Person's going to be, the rifleman's going to be the fall guy here. I mean, it looks like he's going to do time. Who knows what this FBI probe is going to reveal as far as what exactly was going on. But until they have that hard evidence in your athletic department at Auburn, this is the best thing you've had cooking since the Chris Porter days. Scotty Pullman bringing the rock up the floor. I mean, that's been 20 years ago. So you can't make a change unless you have somebody who you know that can replicate the success, and they just don't have that guy. Bruce Pearl's an amazing basketball coach.
Jesse Reese says, are they good without cheating? Which is a fair question to ask, but an additional question to ask in that regard is giving guys who are clearly worth money, the NBA, I mean the future NBA stars who make up a lot of these college teams, there's a financial value sort of attached to their talent, whether the college game gives it to them or not. Is giving them the money that as players they are clearly worth, should that even be defined as cheating anymore? And we don't have enough time left in the day. Should have probably answered that question. But you know, that to me is the addendum here of, by the letter of the law, did coaches like Bruce Pearl cheat, Rick Pitino cheat, other programs we're going to find out about, did they cheat? By the letter of the law, I guess they probably did. But should that still be defined as cheating in a day and age where this sport is worth millions and these young players get none of it on the level, on the record?
I say no. I think you're right. If everybody's doing it and you're trying to compete and you're trying to get these kids, you know, on campus and get them in a uniform so you can compete for conference championships and NCAA title berths and all that stuff that comes with it, and everybody else is doing it, and you got to do it to get that kid there, I'm not judging you for it. I'm not.
Cliff Nielsen says, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, which is kind of a funny line. But what is clear to add to Cliff's comment, if you're not bringing in the kinds of players that Auburn has brought in here recently under Bruce Pearl, you are not in the conversation for the NCAA tournament.
No.
A lot of the SEC teams kind of at that middling level are there because they don't have the same talent that Auburn's enjoying right now. Here on SEC Country Live, whether Mike Johnson's with us or not, we're always looking to close out our show the same way every day. We're always in the search for champions of life. Today, our champion of life comes from last night's NBA All-Star game and, well, a pretty bizarre rendition of the national anthem. You may have seen this already, but I guess it's worth seeing again. It's certainly something to behold. Here is Fergie on the mic.
That our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star spangled?
See, now, I watched it live, and I came in at the end. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know who she was. I thought it might have been Lou Ferrigno with a wig, but it turned out to be Fergie.
The looks on the faces of the players, that is, I believe, Draymond Green. The looks on the faces of the players, it's what's so crazy here. Joel Embiid, who was, I think, one of the first players we saw, the sort of side look he gave here. She's clearly enjoying her moment.
She sold it. I mean, she sold it as far as she thinks that it was good.
I feel like this is a lot like a lot of the karaoke performances I've seen in my life before, where somebody just sort of like gets going. That's probably worth pointing out. The national anthem is not an easy song to sing. I would imagine, I'm not a crooner in my own right, but I would imagine that the national anthem is considered a pretty difficult song to sing. But it's not as hard as she made it look.
No. I thought the best part about it, and to me the best sports broadcast ever, and they win Emmy after Emmy, is TNT's basketball.
Sure.
Chuck, those guys are amazing.
Sure.
So they had the halftime show, it was NERD, it was the Migos, all this mess going on. So they didn't get to come to do their halftime analysis until 15 minutes. They were not on camera until 15 minutes into halftime. And they come on the set, and Barkley's at the end of the thing. He says, well, first half they changed. And Barkley says, hold on now, hold on. He goes, Are we going to pretend like we didn't hear Fergie sing the national anthem? We got to talk about this now.
It's funny stuff.
It was hilarious.
Hans Heiser, good to have you.
Thank you,
Mike
man.
Johnson.
Enjoy it,
It's been
brother.
a lot of fun. Mike will be back tomorrow. Of course, if you missed today's show, you can check us out in podcast form. It'll be up right after the show on iTunes, SoundCloud. We'll have it up for you right away. And do us a huge favor. Share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC here each and every afternoon on SEC Country Live. And for the folks who watch us on YouTube, thanks for checking us out there as well. We'll see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, for another episode of SEC Country Live.